The Texas Department of Motor Vehicles has implemented new identification requirements for vehicle registrations. It's a policy shift that left county offices across the state scrambling to adapt. The changes came after Republican State Representative Brian Harrison sent a letter to Governor Greg Abbott demanding action to prevent undocumented immigrants from registering vehicles. With an estimated 1.7 million undocumented immigrants living in Texas, the policy could have some far-reaching implications for mobility and for public safety in the state. Bayliss Wagner is a state politics reporter for the San Antonio Express News and the Hearst Network, which includes the Houston Chronicle. And she told Houston Matters producer Mincho Jacob about the politics behind the move and what the changes could mean.
So before this, you needed a piece of identity, something proving your identity. But it could be a foreign passport, and it didn't have to have a visa. It was just, okay, this is your passport, it proves who you are, or a driver's license. The other thing is that you could come in with your passport, say your U.S. passport, or your driver's license. If it had been expired within the last year, then it was okay, because they knew that, especially in Texas, there are long waits to renew driver's licenses and other forms of identification. So you could use those. Now, everything has to be current and up to date to be used in the registration process. And you need to show a visa if you're not a citizen, or something proving that you have a green card or another kind of legal status.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a really big shift, and usually these kinds of changes take months or years to make. They might be made through legislation. In this case, the DMV has broad authority to determine what kinds of forms of identification it accepts for registration, and so it seemed to have the leeway to make this change. But they say they're still going to be kind of taking some steps to finalize it.
And before we get into the effects for undocumented or immigrant populations, I mean, you did mention that there is people, even if you have an ID that is expired and you're on wait lists, I mean, there will be an impact for folks who are citizens, right?
Yes. And so the tax offices, the head of, for example, Bayard County's tax office said, we are going to be turning people away potentially who come in with expired forms of identification, because that happens every once in a while. It doesn't happen super, super often. Mostly if you're registering a vehicle, you have an up-to-date driver's license or passport. But they predict that it will happen more often.
So if you go to renew or to get a registration in Texas, you don't go to the DMV, you go to your county tax office. And I know you did speak to a couple. What else were they saying, county tax officials, about these rules and the guidance they'd received thus far?
They were confused. They did not expect this, and I think typically they have lead time when there's an expected rule change. In this instance, they got a letter. The letter from the DMV said it's clarifying a rule about identification, which is very confusing. It said, well, before we required passports or other forms of identification, we're clarifying that also means you need a visa with the passport if it's a foreign passport. All the tax offices, view this as a rule change, not just a clarification, because it will require them to do things very differently. And the majority I spoke to, Harris County's tax office, Comal County, Hayes County, Travis County, Bayard County, they're all still in the process of figuring out what this means. They haven't even put out notices to residents of those counties to let them know yet, because they seem to be a little bit unsure of exactly how to implement it. So that's something that's interesting. I'm still waiting on those counties, besides Bayard, which told me, we're going to go forward with this. We figured out what to do. But the rest of them wouldn't give me a statement besides, we're still working on it.
Right. And stepping back a little bit to Republican State Representative Brian Harrison, he's from Midlothian, which is a suburb of Dallas. Every time I don't know where something is, it's usually right outside of Dallas. But he's taken credit for this change. listeners might know his name from he took credit for the ouster of Texas A&M University president over gender identity teachings. How did he become such an influential person? Because he's not known like, Brandon Creighton or Paul Betancourt for legislation, right?
Yeah, he's an interesting character in the legislature. He I wrote a profile of him right after the A&M ouster, and he actually used to be a White House official under George W. Bush, and then sort of found his way back to Texas. He only has had about 2 bills passed in his 4 years as a state lawmaker. This year, he had 0 bills passed. And what he says is that he doesn't need legislative authority or success to be successful at what he wants to do, which is to push the Texas government further right. He is particularly concerned about what he calls woke indoctrination. So he's very against anything that he perceives as benefiting trans individuals. He's against like gender teachings in colleges. And then he consistently claims that the Texas government is facilitating illegal immigration with things like this, where they're not checking for legal status with car registration. So he's pushed for a lot of changes. He's pushed for us to disassociate from, I think, the American Library Association, which he considered to be woke. He also helped oust a Planned Parenthood a Texas Medical Board medical director who had ties to Planned Parenthood. Even though the Planned Parenthood was in Texas, so was no longer performing abortions, Representative Harrison thought this was unacceptable that this person be involved in state government. So his MO is to go on Twitter. He's built a huge following and to make noise about things that he thinks should change in the executive branch. And oftentimes it works.
Registration fees are pretty significant forms of revenue for county and state. Did he have anything to say about the impact that this loss of fees could mean?
Yeah, so to explain that, county tax offices take registrations. They get about $20 for each, say in Bayard County. They get about $20 per registration. The other $65.50 goes to the state. I asked Representative Harrison what he thought about that, and he said he's completely unconcerned. His goal is to make it harder to be undocumented in Texas, and he believes that that's worth it. And the state does have extra money in its tax funds, so the state isn't at this point concerned about that, I assume. But we could see an impact for county tax offices, and we could see how much it impacts the state as well.
Right. And you reported that there are about 1.7 million undocumented immigrants living in Texas who have been registering their vehicles legally and getting insurance. So what are their options now?
I think that's what was really concerning to the business owners that I talked to. There are 2 in Austin who serve primarily Spanish-speaking populations and have clients who are undocumented and who will go through them to figure out how to register their vehicles and then use those registrations and those titles that they get to buy insurance. And they said, I don't know what they're going to do, but they think it'll be catastrophic because there's also the fact that these, people will not be able to, they're not going to get emissions tests if they can't register their cars. No one does that voluntarily. It's usually because they're required to. And the insurance thing could be an issue. So they also said that this could pave the way for more arrests and deportations because when people are driving unregistered, it's very easy to see that. There's no sticker. And so they'll be pulled over. And then the police could have an opportunity to ask for their papers. Whereas before, Texas required that you have legal status to get a driver's license, but police don't check driver's licenses unless you get in an accident or commit a traffic violation, which is, that happens less frequently than not being registered.
And we'd likely see more people uninsured on the streets as well. So every driver would be affected in some way, shape, or form.
Absolutely.
And do you expect to see more of this type of rule changes, or is there potential for legislation coming from somebody like Harrison in the future?
I think he's made statements that suggest he's not very interested in legislation, but absolutely his MO is to find areas where the state government is not checking for legal status and make sure that they're known and get rules changed. So I absolutely expect this to continue to happen, especially because for Harrison, it's a win, and that's what he wants. I think also these incidents put pressure on Governor Abbott and other lawmakers to look like they're being firmer on immigration issues. So, for example, Harrison is claiming that this is the most impactful action the state has taken on immigration all year, on border security, as he says. So that's going to put some pressure on those lawmakers to do more so that they can have something to say. Because Harrison has such a strong following that sometimes his followers will attack incumbent lawmakers, even if they pass laws, for example, that require sheriffs to work with ICE, or, like Abbott, they send the National Guard from Texas to Chicago to help guard ICE facilities. It's sort of a snowball effect, I guess.
Bayliss Wagner covers state politics for the San Antonio Express News and the Hearst Network, which includes the Houston Chronicle. She spoke with Houston Matters producer Mincho Jacob.